Alrighty, so here is my attempt to make the low poly Blender tutorial a little bit easier. So first off, do note that I'm placing this tutorial along with a few others in our little character modeling YouTube playlist. So if you are having a hard time following along with this, I've also included two easier tutorials that you can follow along and are totally acceptable for this project. I'm going to be basing mine off of this one right here. So if you are working a little bit ahead, you can watch through this video to see kind of where we're going next, but I'll make step-by-step guides in a little bit more depth. And then finally, I do have one other tutorial posted that's a little bit more advanced if anybody wants to do some more rounded character designs. Think more your kind of prototypical Pixar, Nickelodeon style animations. So my goal with this first tutorial is to try and get us to a place somewhere around here where we have our characters kind of base head, torso, arms, and hands all sculpted. So to do so, I'm going to go and create a new file by just going to New, General. And then starting out here, I'm just going to temporarily delete or hide rather the camera and the light, so those are out of the way. And I'm just going to select the cube, press X, and then delete that object just so we're starting from scratch. Now when we're starting out, in addition to, up here at the top on the little gizmo up here, I'm going to click the -Y button, which you can also access by pressing number pad 1 on your number key. But doing so is just going to give us a straight, flat view. And as we model our character, we're going to be doing a lot of it from this view. If you see up here it says Y, not -Y, just make sure to click it again so it says -Y up at the top. Now once we have this all set up, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in our image that we illustrated of our character. So to do so, I'm going to navigate over to my file browser. I know I'm on the Mac computer, but everything we do here will be pretty similar. So just find wherever you saved your illustration. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag it into Blender. And when I let go, it'll add it right to my document. Now the reason we had you press -Y over here is because we want to make sure it's on a perfectly flat plane. And if I actually tilt my camera around, you'll notice that it kind of disappears and is actually only visible in this flat view option. This will make it so that as we start modeling, we can model from this point, but then when we want to turn the camera around and view our model from different angles, we won't have that image all in the way of everything. So I'm going to press -Y again, and you'll see it pops up. So from here, what I want to do is take my illustration and center it on the page. So to do so, I'm going to click the illustration, I'm going to press G to grab it, and I'm going to line it up so it's roughly split right down the middle. I'm going to make sure that Z-axis line is going right down my character's body. And now I can actually go and start modeling the character. And to do so, I'm going to first start out with the character's head. So I'm going to do his head, his nose, and his ears. And then we'll work our way kind of towards the torso, hands, and neck. So to start out with the head, I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to press Shift and A to bring up our mesh spawner. And I'm going to go and create a UV sphere. Now, you'll see here the sphere is down at the bottom, so I want to make sure I bring it up here towards my character's head. So to do so, I'm going to press, actually down here first, I'm going to reduce the sphere segments and rings, so it's 16 on each side. And then I'm going to press G, hold down Z, to move this up towards my character's head. I'm going to press S to scale it down a little bit so it's just a bit smaller than the head of my illustration over here. Now before I do anything to the sphere, what I want to do is I want to cut it down the middle. So to do so, I'm going to go to edit mode right here. I'm going to press Shift and Z, which will go and make it into the wireframe mode. And from here, I can select 1/2 of the circle, or sphere rather. So I'm just going to click and drag and make sure my mouse doesn't go over that Z-axis line. So I'm just selecting 1/2 of this circle here. And I'm going to press X to delete those vertices. So if I press Shift Z again to go back out of X-ray mode, you can see here what we've done is effectively cut that circle in half. And the reason we're doing this is we're going to mirror the circle. So instead of having to sculpt both sides of the face, we'll only have to sculpt one side, and everything we'll do will be mirrored over to the other side as well. And it'll give us a perfectly symmetrical end result. So to mirror this circle, with it selected, I'm going to go down to my modifiers over here. I'm going to add a modifier. I'm going to go over to generate, and I'm going to choose to do a mirror modifier. The only thing I need to do from here is make sure I have clipping enabled. And now you'll see here that I have this perfect little circle. But what you'll notice is if I go back to edit mode, I'm just going to select some of the vertices right here. I'm going to press G. As I stretch those out, the vertices on the other side are also going to react in the same way. And this is how we're going to go and, like I said, ensure that our character we sculpt is perfectly symmetrical. So now that we have this in, what we're going to do is start to kind of sculpt the face and get it as close as we can to this design over here. So what I like to do by starting out with is just kind of going through and sculpting the head in a general head shape. So to do so, what I'm going to do is actually kind of flip over to the side. I'm going to click X up here. I'm going to grab my vertex selection. I'm going to make sure proportional editing is enabled. And the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of take this back point over here, press G, scale my circle of influence down. I'm going to kind of push the back part of the head in a little bit. I'm going to go over to the front here. I'm going to press G. I'm going to push this in a little bit. And like I said, I'm going to kind of start sculpting what I want my character's head to look like. So this is where it does help to have a little bit of a reference. I know I didn't ask you to draw a side version, but when you're looking at a character's head, generally speaking, we have the chin sticking out a little bit, and then the top of the head is kind of pushed up with the cranium. I'm going to select over here and kind of bring where would be the eye bridge up. And I'll also make sure to view it from the side too. And I'm going to use that reference I have here to make the proportions fit on my character. I'll add hair later, so I'm not going to be too focused on pushing this out to cover that up. But as you can see here, I'm starting to get a basic little head shape in, and it doesn't have to be perfect at all. Once we add a lot of the textures and everything on top, it's going to look a lot smoother. So now that I have that kind of basic head shape in, the only thing I'm going to do to it right now is go and add a nose. And for this, we're going to use a new tool. So I'm still in edit mode over here. I'm going to press Shift C, and I'm going to add my nose right on this face over here. And to make the nose, we're going to do a kind of quick cheat way. So in edit mode, I'm going to press K to bring up my knife tool. I'm going to click on where I want the top of the nose to start, and I'm going to draw a little triangle. Once I'm done cutting, I'll press enter, that'll make the cut, and now you see here where I went with that knife tool, it added a little cut right here, and this is now new geometry that I can click and edit around. So So I'm gonna press K again to bring my knife tool, and I'm gonna make another cut that will go from this corner of the triangle back down to this vertex right here. Hit enter. And now what I'm gonna be able to do is grab my vertex tool, click this point on the nose, and then using the move tool, I'm gonna shrink this down and just bring this point out right here. And just like that, we have a very basic little triangle nose shape. If I want to do some small tweaks, I could bring this up a little bit to make that point a little bit more shallow. If I want to do some stuff like make my character's chin maybe a little bit more prominent, I can just start selecting these points. And it's always good to edit them from these side views, so I'm making sure I'm not skewing my character's face too much in any certain direction. But that's really all there is to it in terms of sculpting the head. Now, if you have a more complicated design, say you have some like horns on the head, you might want to start going, and like I said, you can go into something like face select over here, start grabbing these faces, and then extruding them out by pressing E or pressing G, grabbing these and moving these in different directions. But just like that, I'm pretty much done with the character's head. We'll add some ears later. From here on out though, I'm gonna start moving down to the torso. So for my character's torso, what I'll do is I'll press Shift A. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna spawn a cylinder, and I'm gonna drop the cylinder down, lower the vertices until it's about 8. And what that's going to do is that's going to give us a very nice kind of simple shape that we'll be able to start building our design off of. Now, if you notice up here, what happened is this cylinder is still up here in the same collection as the sphere. That's why you don't see the cylinder showing up on its own box up here. And I select this and move it around, it moves the head around as well. So I'm actually going to unspawn that cylinder, and I'm just going to go up here, close this out, right click, and just make sure I don't have that sphere selected when I'm going around and creating my new mesh. So everything's unselected, press Shift A, go to mesh, create a cylinder, and now you see the cylinder has its own collection up here. So I'm going to go back into edit mode, press G to move it, press C to move it up, press S to scale it so it's roughly about the size of my body. I want to make it a little bit taller too, so I'll press S again while holding Z and scale that up to roughly fit my character's proportions. Now, the same exact thing we did with the circle. Once I have that kind of in position, I'm going to press Shift C to go into that X-ray view mode, go to my object selector, select half that cylinder, press X, delete the vertices. Oop. It looks like I accidentally deleted more than I wanted to there. So I'll make sure I go into point selection mode. I think that was my issue there. And now again, select, press X, delete vertices. And now you see I have half that cylinder. So I'll pop back into object mode, press Shift C to get out of the X-ray again, and I'll go add another mirror modifier, making sure again I have clipping selected. Now, with my torso, what I want to do is I want the ability to go and sculpt it so it's not just a straight up and down line going down the sides of my body. So if I want to go and add some more geometry to this, I'm going to use a new function we haven't done before, and that is the loop cut. So I'm selecting the cylinder here, I'm going back in edit mode, and I'm going to scroll down my little list of tools right here until I get to the loop cut option. It looks like a little cube with the line kind of cutting it down the middle. Now with this option, I'm going to click on the cylinder. I'm going to click and hold my mouse. And as I drag my mouse up and down, I can essentially choose places where I might want to go and add another cut. And now if I go back and grab just my select box, what I can do is I can start to select these cuts, press G, and stretch them out a little bit. So if I want my waist to be a little bit narrower, I want to create, a more natural kind of body position, I can start to have those, where my shoulders stick out a little bit more. Imagine if you want your character to have some hips too, you can add as many of these loop cuts as you want. So for example, if I go add another loop cut, like right around here, I could go over to the side if I wanted to. I could select this point. Boop. Now I still had the loop cut tool activated there, so I just kept adding more loop cuts. So I'm gonna undo that real quick with Control Z and make sure once I'm done adding my loop cuts, I go back to my select box. And from here, I could do stuff like if I wanted to add a little bit of a belly to my character, I could go and do that. And I'll probably increase my sphere of influence too, so it moves a couple more of those boxes as well too. And again, that is really all there is to the torso. You can go as complicated as you want with it, but the next thing we're going to do is go over the shoulders. So in order to do the shoulders, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a new function, again, we haven't done before. So in order to enable this new function, what we're going to need to do is we're actually going to need to go into the settings real quick. So we're going to go over to where we see edit. We're going to go to preferences. From here, we're going to go to extensions, and we're going to make sure we have this loop tools extension installed. So when you go to get extensions, it should show up on this little list. You're just going to scroll down or click the little search option right here, and you're going to look up loop tools. And then next to it, you're going to click the little install button. And what this will do is add a new set of features when we right click, where we see all these different loop tools. So I'll show you how we're going to use those on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and make the arms of my character. So I'm going to go over to face select mode by pressing 3 on my keyboard or clicking face select up here. I'm going to click these two boxes. And the first thing I'm going to do is inset the faces, which I can do by pressing I. As you can see here, I can go through and essentially take these and make some smaller faces in between them. Now I want to extrude my arms from these, so if I wanted to, I could just go up here. Once I have those inset faces selected, press E to extrude. And now as you can see here, I'm extruding some little, essentially just rounded rectangular prisms. But if I want to make these a little bit more of a naturally rounded shape, I can also right click, hover over loop tools, and then select the circle mode. What that's going to go through is when it's going to go and turn that square inset into more of a circular option. Now I want to make sure too that that circle fits in my shoulder right here. You can see over here it's going getting a little wonky up here. So it says method, I'm going to change that to fit inside. And then what I'm going to do is actually, I'm just going to hit X and delete these faces. Essentially cut those out. I'm going to start to go and grab these vertexes here by grabbing my vertex selection tool and just stretching them so they fit a little bit better. Turn off proportional editing for that. I'm going to go and put these so they're a little bit more even. And from here, I can start building out my arms. So I'm going to go from the back view real quick. Again, I'm just selecting these points, these different vertexes, and just making them all kind of roughly in line with each other. And now you can see here, I got a pretty good little arm situation going. And now if I want to extrude all of these, I'm going to go to edge select mode. I'm going to hold shift while clicking on these edges. I'll go back to my front view and I'll just press E to extrude them, and I'll extrude them along this pathway. Now, I'm not being the most careful about making sure like it's 100% on my model. You'll see here that in my actual design, it's a little bit taller than it is in the end. So if I really wanted to, once I have all these points selected here, I could actually just grab these points if I wanted to, press G and, make this hole as kind of big as I want. So if I'm not satisfied with how big my arms were there, I can just ensure that hole is going to be a bit bigger. So maybe I'll go and just bring it a little bit more upwards. I'll then select all those points again. Go back to my front view. I'll press E to extrude. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude it to just a little bit. And while I'm extruding, I'm going to hold X so I can extrude it straight outwards. So I'm going to extrude it just a little bit. I'm then going to press E again to extrude it a little bit more. And what I'm doing here is essentially creating a couple more segments so that as we go through and start to animate these characters, we have places for their body to bend. Now, once I get to this point and I'm ready to start going through and closing this area, once I have all this selected, I can just press F and that'll go through and fill in that face. Now to make my arms, what I'll do is I'll go over here and I'm just gonna, again, select these faces. I'll press I to go and inset the faces. And if you're having a hard time insetting it, sometimes it helps to just zoom out, and that'll let me go and inset it real nice and small. And again, now that I have that point selected, I can press E to extrude it. I'm realizing I probably made my hand way too small there to begin with. So just like we did before, I'll go view it from the side mode. I'll select these points and I will just scale them up. And again, the way I'm able to select these edges as opposed to just the individual vertices is by ensuring I'm in that edge select mode. I can also go back to vertex select mode. So looking from this view, I want my hands relatively, my wrists relatively big compared to that sleeve. So I'll go over here and stretch them out accordingly. And once I have kind of my wrist modeled, maybe I want to actually bring these points up a little bit. So it's almost like my sleeve is kind of dangling down a little bit. I can even select these points and just kind of bring them up too if I want that sleeve to maybe taper a little bit as it gets closer, almost like I had like elastic cuffs on. But now what I'll do is I'll go back to face select mode, I'll select that face, and then I'll extrude that out a little bit for my wrist. I'll extrude it out again for my palm, kind of up to where my knuckles would be, and then one more time for my actual hands. And then from here, we can kind of just go and start to shape and model the hands. So I want my hands to be a little bit wider at this point. So from face select mode, I'm gonna select these two faces, maybe these three actually. I'll kind of go from the side view mode, I'll press G, and I can start to raise those out a little bit. Press G, stretch those out. And for this sculpt, I'm not going to worry too much about fingers. We'll just paint those in with texture. Now, I don't want the ends of my fingers to all just be flat like this. So what I'm going to do is select this face right here. In edit mode, I'm going to grab my knife tool and I'll use this to kind of cut down the middle of the hands. I'll then select this edge that I just created with the knife tool. I'll switch back over, I'll press G and push that out a little bit. So you see here, I'm starting to get more of a hand shape. Now I can still go through and model these a little bit more as well. Say I wanted to go through and make my palm not as flat. I might do some stuff like select that, press G, hold down Z, move that up a little bit so I can start to get the curve of my hand a little bit more. And as far as the thumb, what I like to do is just kind of select this point here at the edge of our hand. Again, I'll press E to extrude that a little bit. I don't want my thumb so big, so once I extrude that point out a little bit, I'll press S to scale it down. And I might extrude it out one more time. And as I'm doing this too, I'll just add some more loop cuts. So wherever I might want my character to bend, it's good to add a couple loop cuts. So around my thumb, I might have a loop cut right here. Around where my knuckle is, I might add another loop cut. And if I think about it, I might add like another loop cut somewhere down here in the middle, just to allow more flexibility for my hands. So if you see here, I'm not totally on model, but I'm close enough. And this is why having that reference is great. But if you're struggling with the reference, I don't want you to worry, too much about it. And then for the neck, what we're gonna do is pretty simple thing as well. So I'm just gonna go for the neck. Oop, I accidentally added another loop cut there, so let me undo that real quick. I accidentally undid too far. So for the neck of my character, I'm just gonna hide the sphere right here so I can just see all of this goodness. I'm gonna turn on edge select, select these edges. And if I want to bring those inwards, I'm gonna press S for scale. I'm just gonna move my mouse inwards a little bit. Now you can see this area is starting to close up. I can press F to fill that in if I want. And again, if I want to start kind of making my neck area, I'm just gonna select this cube right here, press I to inset. I'll inset this face. I'll then just kind of scooch it on over by pressing G, holding Z. And then I will go and extrude it upwards by pressing E and then just moving my mouse up. And now if I reveal that sphere and zoom out here, you can see in just about 20 or so minutes, I was able to go through and model the majority of my character's upper body. So in the next video, what I'll go over is the kind of lower half of the body. I'll go over adding the legs, the shoes. That will probably take one video. And then I'll have about 2 others for hair and accessories, and then texturing, which will probably be the most difficult part. But from here, it's looking pretty good. And if you want to, you can always take any of these objects and shade them smooth if you want that kind of more smooth looking shading. But since we've been modeling these as very low poly, it's just best to keep them in that shade flat mode. And again, from here, we can still go and edit stuff around. Like if I want to take my character's head, I might want to scooch that a little bit more over. If you look at somebody's neck, usually we see the neck kind of connect to the back of the head. I can adjust any of these points too, but I'm going to not overcomplicate these designs and leave it at that. So, stop recording.